Hi everyone, welcome to The Random and the Boring. Today we will explore some crazy conspiracy theories that were discussed on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. This is the part 2 of the series. If you haven't seen part 1, then please do check it out on my channel. The thing about conspiracy theory is that they are so juicy and interesting that do your research before believing them all. Let's check out some of them now. The time travel.
You know, that was the theory that Terrence McKenna had to the thing that's going to change the universe is that one day someone's going to invent a time machine, and that when they invent a time machine, all time ceases to become linear. So you think if you have a time machine, well, I'll just go back to the time where they were making the pyramids and I'll watch them do it. That's not what it works like. What he was saying, you can't travel where there are no roads. So once a road gets built, then you can travel. So once a time machine gets invented, then anyone from the invention of the time machine forward to forever can come back to that moment and can go to any point in time from that moment to the end of time. So all time ceases to be linear. So there's no like tomorrow will be Wednesday and the next day will be Thursday. No. It's everything happens everywhere all at once. So people can travel back and forth through time. You can never own anything because someone could just travel through time and take it away from you when you weren't looking. Like as time travel gets more and more sophisticated, you can go back and forth in time while you're talking to people. You know, if you don't like what you said, you could rewind and start all over again. If you're in an argument with your wife, you can go to the library and get information and come back and go, actually, you know, Herodotus once said, and then bam, your wife thinks you're the smartest guy in the world. Like this, but there would be no normal life anymore. It would the world itself would be completely unrecognizable because time would mean nothing. You'd be able to travel back and forth. You know?
The parallel universe theory.
What about this? What if every time you went to sleep and you woke up, you passed into a nearby and very similar universe, but not quite the same? And depending upon your choices and how you live your life, it's how you wake up and what new one you pop into on the other side. And everyone's just a little bit different. The whole world changes just a little bit each time you make a decision, one way or another. Everything changes when you wake up. You think the world is static because it is when you're awake. You have no fucking idea what's happening while you're asleep. And when you wake up again, you have this foggy recollection of the past. And that's what you're going by. You're going by every morning waking up with a foggy recollection of the past. That's what you're doing. And you're assuming that nothing's changed and everything's static. And while you were asleep for 8 hours, nothing weird happened. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You have no idea. You're dreaming. You're having crazy fantasies and shit. Weird stuff is happening. You're fucking mermaids. You're flying through the air on a helicopter. You know, weird things happen when you're dreaming. What is all that about? Yeah. We don't even know. We have no idea what that is. That soup of possibilities that's fucking swirling around in between your ears while you're snoring up a storm. And then, boom, you wake up. Are you sure those memories are real? Are you sure that this isn't a whole completely new universe that you're living in today?
Or assimilation.
The lost city of Atlantis.
There's a location in the Western Sahara Desert of Mauritania called the Richat Structure. It's also commonly referred to as the Eye of the Sahara. It is a site that most people have never seen or heard of before, which is truly peculiar because it's so spectacular. It's a site that astronauts typically use to reference from space. It is a geological feature that is said to be volcanic in nature, and what's so spectacular about this is that it just so happens to match more than a dozen striking similarities to what Plato had described as the lost ancient capital city of Atlantis. Plato had described Atlantis as being the capital. Let me just mention that because it was an empire said to be made up of 10 kingdoms, and what I'm focusing on is the lost capital city, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 3 of water, 2 of land, which matches the Richat structure. It also was said to have an opening to the sea at the south, and if you look at it from satellite imagery, you can clearly see that water had ran through it. And furthermore, it was said to have mountains to the north, and you just so happen to have mountains called the Atlas mountain chain, which Atlas was said to be the very first king of Atlantis. And what's interesting is that the very first known king of Mauritania, which is where the Richat structure is located, is also their very first known king was also named Atlas. And though I'm not saying that that's the same individual, but what we do today is we pass down names, right? Like people like, oh, my dad's name's John, and so is my son. And so it's another striking similarity, but it goes further than that. Like there's geological similarities, such as the fact that Atlantis was said to be made up of red, black, and white color stone, which is another similarity you see at the Richat structure. It was said to have an abundance of gold and that the outer walls were lined with it. And it turns out that Mauritania is loaded with gold, and not only that, the richest person ever known to exist in all of mankind is Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire, which consisted partly of modern-day Mauritania. And he was so rich from gold that he would be richer than Elon Musk and like Bezos combined almost. Like many unfathomable amount of billions of dollars. So that's another similarity.
What year was this?
The Antarctica.
One of the things I find most striking is the presence of Antarctica on ancient maps, because we didn't discover it until 1820. And yet it's on maps drawn in the 1500s with great detail, which again were based on much older source maps that have now been lost to us. Astonishing thing is the so-called Pinkerton world map. I don't know if you can find it, Jamie. Drawn, I think, in 1813 or 1818, based on the latest exploration data at that time. And where Antarctica is, yeah, that one, keep going right. It just shows a hole where Antarctica is. Because it was an honest map. Nobody had found it by then. But if you go back to, for example, the Wolsey-Wooler world map drawn in 1530 or thereabouts, you find Antarctica is present. That map shows Antarctica exactly where it should be. And it shows it, there we go, Antarctica, at the tip of South America, just south of South Africa.
And what did they call it back then?
Well, they call it the Southern Land, and it's larger than it is today, but it was larger than it is today during the Ice Age. Antarctica was a much bigger. Now, what the fuck is it doing on a map drawn in the 1500s, which we know was based on older source maps when nobody knew it existed in the 1500s? To me, the obvious answer is we are dealing with the fingerprints of a lost civilization that mapped the world and that left evidence of that mapping, which ancient map makers found and used and incorporated into their maps. These maps can be very confusing because they were trying to mix exploration data from their own period with data from the older maps. But when you look at these maps in depth, one of the things I find...
One world government.
The only way to make a one world government work is to have the people embrace it. They have to want it because nobody wants it. So the trick is to make people want it, to embrace it. There's only one way. The only way. And they've known this forever. The Vatican knew this. The Pope wanted to rule the world. They all knew it, but they couldn't do it. They all knew it, but they knew one way, but there's no way how they're going to pull it off.
What's the one way, man?
The only way is if there was some extraterrestrial threat from up above us. That would be the only way to have everyone embrace the one world government. They all knew that for years.
But they didn't work so far.
That's the plan. They could never make it work.
Plan, though.
They didn't have the technology 500 years ago. The Vatican knew about it. They wanted it. And you go to the Vatican, you see paintings of like UFOs with aliens in them. And back when I used to believe in UFOs, but before I figured out that UFOs they want us to believe in UFOs. They're preparing us for a fake alien invasion. That's always been the plan. A one world government. The only way to do it is to get us to embrace it. And the only way to embrace it is from an alien attack. Ronald Reagan talked about it many times at the UN, CFR. He talked about it because wouldn't it make, he looked at all the leaders of the nation, of the world, and said, wouldn't it make our lives easier if we just had some kind of extraterrestrial threat?
The Adolf Hitler conspiracy.
Because a lot of people are like, finding Hitler. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
They found Hitler. He died.
Yeah, I mean,
Not really?
we don't know.
Right.
I mean, this isn't like Ancient Aliens. This is, they declassified a bunch of documents. Both the Israelis, the British, and the Germans and Americans in the past 20 years have been consistently declassifying documents. And there were a bunch of specifically FBI documents that we were spending millions and millions of dollars actively searching for Hitler after the war, as was...
Really?
Yeah, like millions of dollars. Like Hoover was like, no, send more FBI agents to South America, to North Africa, go to the Canary Islands, go to Spain, trying to find out where this guy went. The Russians got the body, and they got his skull. And when they brought it back to Moscow, nobody has ever been able to independently verify who and what this body is. They let one genetic test occur, and the body with the bullet holes that they said was Hitler, and have said, and that's the narrative, that's the story, that's all the eyewitness accounts that are even in the vicinity of collaborating with each other, and corroborating each other's testimony. Like the closest version, because none of it seems to be very accurate, is that, okay, here's Hitler's skull, and when they did the genetic testing, it's that of a 35-year-old woman. So they're like, oh, well, this isn't Hitler. So what you had in South America, both Chile and Argentina back-to-back had fascist regimes. You had Perón, who was part of the Nazi party starting all the way back into the mid-30s. He's the president of Argentina. So the Red Cross, there was about 3 different rat lines that guys were able to successfully get out of Europe into South America. And there's no question that we're talking thousands, if not tens of thousands of high-ranking Nazis made it there.
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. And I'm not talking like little soldiers. I'm talking high-ranking Nazis. But what you got in South America were isolated German-only communities. You could go into Bariloche, Argentina, and I'd be like, "Buenos dias, amigos," and they're like, "Guten Morgen." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I meant good morning. Yeah, sorry, it's 2017, right? I thought we spoke Spanish here."
So in 2017, you were there, and they were speaking German.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Well, I don't look very. I might look more European than I do. So it's just them seeing me walking down the street and be like,
"Wow."
Yeah. And there's tons of communities. I mean, if you go to Colonia Dignidad, which is now called Villa Bavaria, it is only German.
Whoa.
In the center of Chile, in the mountains of Chile. Like there's no Spanish being spoken there. It is exclusively German.
And these are the descendants of Nazis.
Powerful Nazis.
Holy shit. Are there any legitimate eyewitness accounts of Hitler in South America?
Absolutely, potentially.
Whoa.
Yep, eyewitness accounts. I saw him get off a boat. I saw him meet here. And if it was just some person saying it, it's almost meaningless.
Right.
But if you look at the context of who this person is, the wealth that they have that they shouldn't have, like, can you explain how you got so rich in 2 generations? Okay, your grandpa got here from Germany in 1946. That's weird. And he's on a legitimate visa with an Argentinian passport. Also weird. And now he's a war refugee that's now worth millions of dollars. How does this work?
Yeah. The ancient civilization
is above the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid are 5 further chambers. And these chambers are roofed and floored with granite beams that weigh about 70 tons each. And there are hundreds of them. And these 70-ton granite beams, which to put in context, a 70-ton beam is equivalent in weight to 35 large SUVs. These 70-ton granite beams have been elevated to a height of more than 350 feet above the ground and carefully and precisely placed in position. It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage. You can say, oh, perhaps they built a ramp and hauled the stones up the ramp. But then you have to confront basic laws of physics. You can't haul a stone weighing tens of tons up a slope that exceeds 10 degrees. Then you start doing the calculation. How long a ramp do I need with a 10-degree slope to get to 350 feet above the ground? And the answer is you need a fucking long ramp, which should still be there. Yeah. Because it couldn't have been a sand ramp. It would have collapsed under the weight of those stones. It had to be as massive as the pyramid itself. So this begins to seem like an absurd idea, the idea that is foisted on us by archaeology. Maybe the idea that they regard as absurd, namely that psychic powers were cultivated by ancient civilizations, that they could use powers of the human mind that we have allowed to lapse. Maybe that idea deserves further consideration.
And there you have it for our part 2 of this video. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel, and smash that bell icon. Till then, keep questioning and keep looking for the answers.